My name is Rachel. I am 34 years old, a project manager at a mid-sized logistics firm, and for 6 years I have been married to Daniel, a good man, a kind man, and the only son of Margaret and Howard Chen. Margaret and Howard are what I would describe carefully and precisely as difficult people, not cruel in obvious ways. Not the kind of in-laws who shout or make scenes or say openly terrible things at Christmas dinner. They are subtler than that. They operate through implication, through omission, through the particular social pressure of a family that has always done things a certain way and expects that way to continue regardless of who joins it. From the beginning, they had made it quietly clear that I was an outsider. Not unwelcome, they were too polished for that, but not quite inside either. I was the woman Daniel had chosen over their careful suggestions. I was the woman who had her own career, her own opinions, her own way of doing things. I was, in Margaret's precise and loaded phrase, very independent. She said it the way some people say interesting, technically a compliment, unmistakably not. For 6 years I had managed. I had attended every holiday, every birthday, every Sunday lunch that was technically optional but practically mandatory. I had smiled and helped in the kitchen and asked about Margaret's garden and listened to Howard's opinions about things he did not fully understand. I had done all of it because I loved Daniel and Daniel loved his family, and that was supposed to be the deal. Then came the dinner invitation. It arrived on a Tuesday, a phone call from Margaret, warm and unusually friendly. The kind of warmth that should have been a warning. Margaret, mother-in-law. Rachel, darling. Howard and I have been thinking. We've been so distant lately, haven't we? We'd love to have you and Daniel for dinner this Saturday. The whole family. A proper sit-down. Just to reconnect. No occasion. Just us. No occasion. Just us. 14 people, as it turned out. But I didn't know that yet. That sounds lovely, I said. And I meant it. Genuinely, because I am always willing to try again. That is perhaps my most persistent flaw. Saturday arrived. Daniel and I dressed up, he in a blazer, me in a burgundy dress I'd been saving for something worth wearing it to. We drove to the address Margaret had texted, a restaurant called Harrington's, in the kind of neighborhood where the menus have no prices on them and the waitstaff introduce themselves by name. I had never been to Harrington's. I knew of it. Everyone in the city knew of it the way you know of a place you will probably never go, not because it's exclusive, but because a single dinner there costs what most people spend on groceries for a month. I looked at Daniel in the car. Rachel. Did you know it was Harrington's? Daniel. Mom just said a nice place. I assumed she meant Giovanni's. Giovanni's was where the family usually went for celebrations. Pleasant. Reasonable. The kind of Italian restaurant where the owner knows your name and the tiramisu is genuinely good. Harrington's was not Giovanni's. We walked in. The host led us to a private dining room in the back, and there they were, all 14 of them. Margaret and Howard at the heads of the long table. Daniel's 2 sisters with their husbands. 3 aunts and uncles I recognized from weddings. 2 cousins I had met exactly once. And at the far end, Daniel's grandmother, Nana Rose, 91 years old, sharp as a pin, dressed in her best pearls. Everyone looked up when we entered. Margaret rose and spread her arms. Margaret. There they are. The guests of honor. I smiled. Daniel smiled. We sat down. No one mentioned that we were the guests of honor. No one explained what we were being honored for. The menus arrived, thick leather-bound things, heavy in the hand, and I opened mine. There were no prices. I had been in enough expensive restaurants to know what that means. It means the prices exist, they are simply on a different menu, the one the host gives the person who is paying. I looked up. Margaret was watching me over her menu with a small, pleasant smile. Something in my stomach went very still. What followed was one of the most extraordinary performances I have ever witnessed. The family ordered as though money was not a concept that applied to them that evening. Appetizers for the table, 3 of them, including a seafood platter that the waiter described with the kind of reverence usually reserved for religious occasions. Bottles of wine, chosen by Howard with great deliberation and a confidence that suggested he had been waiting for this specific opportunity for some time. A Wagyu beef dish for the table to share. Lobster, 4 of them, ordered individually by Margaret, both sisters, and one of the aunts. A rack of lamb. Sides that arrived in their own small cast-iron pans. I ordered the salmon. Daniel ordered the chicken. We looked at each other once, briefly, and looked away. The conversation was warm and easy, family stories, old jokes, Nana Rose's gentle observations about the food. Howard made a toast to family. Always family. Margaret reached across the table at one point and squeezed my hand. Margaret, we're so glad you're part of this family, Rachel. We don't say it enough. I said thank you. I meant it less than I would have an hour earlier. Dessert arrived, a trolley of them, ordered freely, including something involving gold leaf that one of the cousins photographed extensively before eating. Coffee. Digestives for the uncles. A second bottle of wine that Howard selected with the same careful confidence as the first. And then the bill arrived. The waiter placed it, a slim leather folder, directly in front of me. The table went quiet in that particular way that isn't really quiet at all. 14 people suddenly very interested in their coffee cups, their dessert plates, the middle distance. Margaret looked at her wine glass. Howard straightened his jacket. Daniel had gone very still beside me. I picked up the folder. I opened it. I looked at the number. $4,380, plus the suggested gratuity. I set it down. I looked up. I looked at Margaret. She met my eyes with a smile so practiced it had no edges left on it. Margaret, you're so successful, Rachel. We always say, Daniel married such a capable woman. You don't mind, do you? Just this once. Just this once. I looked at that smile for a long moment. I thought about 6 years of Sunday lunches. 6 years of Margaret's careful, edged compliments. 6 years of being very independent in a tone that was never quite a compliment. And then I did something no one at that table expected. I smiled back. I closed the folder. And I called the waiter over. The waiter, a young man named Elliot, who had been professionally pleasant all evening, leaned down attentively. I spoke quietly. 2 sentences. The table was just loud enough with resumed conversation that no one heard exactly what I said, but Elliot heard. He straightened. He nodded once, with complete understanding, and walked away. Daniel looked at me. Daniel, what did you say to him? Rachel. I asked him to split the bill. Daniel blinked. Rachel. 14 ways. Itemized. So everyone pays exactly what they ordered. The color left Daniel's face slowly, the way paint fades in sunlight, gradual, then suddenly complete. Across the table, Margaret had heard enough to understand what was happening. The practiced smile flickered, just once, just briefly, before reassembling itself. Margaret. Rachel, darling, I think there may have been a misunderstanding. Rachel. No misunderstanding at all, Margaret. Elliot is just going to make sure everyone has their own bill. It's much simpler that way. Elliot returned 12 minutes later with 14 separate bills on a tray, each in its own slim folder, each delivered with the same professional grace he had maintained all evening. He placed them around the table with quiet efficiency. He did not make eye contact with anyone in particular. He was, I thought, extraordinarily good at his job. The table went very quiet. Margaret's bill, lobster, 2 glasses of the expensive wine, dessert, her share of the appetizer platter, came to $640. Howard's, the Wagyu, 3 digestives, his selections of wine, came to $720. The aunt who had ordered lobster looked at her bill with an expression I will not soon forget. No one had brought enough. That was the thing. They had come prepared for a free dinner, not for the reality of what they had actually ordered. Wallets came out slowly. Cards were produced with the energy of people doing something they had not planned to do and were not happy about. Nana Rose, who had ordered soup, a small main course and tea, looked at her bill of $62, looked at me across the table and said nothing. But her eyes, sharp and dark and 91 years old, held something that was not quite a smile and not quite an apology, and was, I thought, the most honest thing anyone at that table had offered me all evening. Daniel did not speak in the car for the first 10 minutes. I did not press him. I watched the city lights pass outside the window and felt something I had not expected to feel, not triumph, not anger, but a very clean, very quiet sense of having finally been exactly who I was without apology. When he finally spoke, his voice was careful. Daniel, my mother is going to call tomorrow. Rachel. I know. Daniel, she's going to say you embarrassed the family. Rachel. She ordered lobster and expected me to pay for it, Daniel. At a restaurant I didn't choose, at a dinner I didn't know was a setup, in front of 14 people who were all in on it. Tell me, who embarrassed who? Another silence. Longer this time. Daniel, I didn't know. I want you to know that. I didn't know what they were planning. I looked at him. His profile in the passing streetlights, the jaw I had known for 8 years, the hands on the wheel that I trusted. I believed him. That was the complicated part. I believed he hadn't known. And I also believed that his not knowing was itself a choice, a long habit of not asking his family the questions that needed asking, of looking away from the things that were easier not to see. Rachel. I know you didn't know. But Daniel, this has to stop. Not just tonight. All of it. The comments. The pressure. The way your mother looks at me like I'm something temporary. I have been patient for 6 years. I am not going to be patient forever. He was quiet for a long time. Then he reached across the center console and took my hand. Daniel. You're right. I'll talk to her. I did not say anything. I held his hand and watched the city and waited to see if this time he would mean it. Margaret called the next morning at 9:15. I was on my second coffee, sitting at the kitchen table in the quiet that follows a difficult night, the kind of quiet that isn't restful exactly, but necessary. The kind you sit in because moving through it is the only way out of it. I had not slept well. Not because I regretted what I had done, I didn't, not for a single moment, but because the mind, after a long-held tension finally releases, does not simply switch off. It replays, it examines, it turns the evening over and over like a stone in water looking for the edges. Daniel had slept beside me, quiet and still, in the way of someone processing something they hadn't finished processing yet. We had not argued, we had talked, really talked, in the careful, honest way that is harder than arguing and more important, and then we had run out of words and lain in the dark, and I had listened to his breathing slow and even out while I stared at the ceiling and thought about 6 years. 6 years of Sundays. 6 years of kitchen help and bitten tongues and holiday smiles. 6 years of being very independent in Margaret's particular tone, which managed to make self-sufficiency sound like a personality flaw. 6 years of being made to feel, in small and deniable ways, that I was a guest in my own marriage. And then my phone rang. I looked at the screen. Margaret Chen. I took one breath, not for courage, I didn't need courage, but for clarity, and answered on the second ring. Margaret. Rachel. I think we need to talk about last night. Rachel. I agree completely. A brief pause. She had expected resistance, or apology, or the careful diplomatic softening I usually offered in difficult conversations. She had gotten none of those things, and the pause was the sound of her recalibrating. Margaret. What you did was embarrassing, in front of the whole family. Nana Rose was upset. The girls were upset. Howard. Rachel. Margaret. You placed the $4,000 bill in front of me and called it just this once. You invited 14 people to an expensive restaurant and assumed I would pay for all of it without being asked. I'd like to understand, at what point in that plan did you think I would be fine with it? Silence. The real kind, not the polished pause of someone choosing their words, but the silence of someone who has been asked a question they cannot answer cleanly. Margaret. We thought. You do very well, Rachel. We thought. Rachel. Doing well doesn't mean I owe your family a $4,000 dinner, Margaret. Doing well means I worked hard for what I have, and I will decide on my own what I spend it on and who I spend it on. Another silence. Longer. When Margaret spoke again, something in her voice had shifted, not softened exactly, but recalibrated, the way people recalibrate when they realize the ground has changed under them and they are not sure yet how much. Margaret. I see. Rachel. I hope you do. Because I love Daniel and I want to have a good relationship with his family, but a good relationship has to go both ways. I think we both know that last night was not that. I let that sit for a moment. The Sunday morning outside my kitchen window was grey and perfectly still, bare branches, empty street, the kind of quiet that feels deliberate. Rachel, I'll see you at Christmas, Margaret. Have a good Sunday. I hung up, I set the phone face down on the table, I finished my coffee, my hands were completely steady. I want to be honest about something I had expected to feel more. Triumph, perhaps, or relief, or the particular warm satisfaction of having finally said what needed saying. Instead, what I felt was simpler than any of those things. I felt like myself, fully, cleanly, without apology. I had not realized until that moment how long it had been since I had felt that way in anything connected to Daniel's family. Daniel came downstairs 20 minutes later. He had heard me on the phone. The kitchen was small enough that walls didn't offer much privacy, and his face, when he appeared in the doorway, held the expression of a man who had been listening and was not entirely sure what he felt about what he'd heard. I poured him coffee. He sat down across from me. "Daniel." She called. "Rachel." She did. "Daniel." "How did it go, Rachel?" "It went honestly," which is more than I can say for most of our conversations. He was quiet for a moment, both hands around his mug. "Daniel." "Rachel, I need to tell you something. And I need you to hear it, not as an excuse, but as the truth." I waited. "Daniel, I have known for a long time that my mother treats you differently than she treats the rest of the family. I have told myself it was generational, or that she just needed time, or that it wasn't as bad as it looked from the outside. I told myself those things because they were easier than the alternative." He looked up. "Daniel." "The alternative being that I should have said something years ago and I didn't. And last night happened partly because of that, because she has never been given a reason to believe there were limits. I should have been that reason. I wasn't. That's on me." I looked at my husband across the kitchen table, this man I had chosen, this man who was flawed in the specific and human way of people who love their families too much in the wrong directions, and I felt something loosen in my chest that I hadn't realized was tight. It wasn't everything. An acknowledgement is not a solution. Words on a Sunday morning are not the same as changed patterns over months and years. I knew that. But it was real, and real was somewhere to start. "Rachel, I know, and I believe you. But Daniel, I need you to do more than tell me. I need you to show me, because I have been patient for 6 years, and I am 34 years old, and I do not have another 6 years of patience to spend on this." He nodded. Once. Slowly. "Daniel, I'll talk to her. A real conversation, not the version where I smooth things over and hope they improve. A real one. Rachel, that's all I'm asking." We finished our coffee. Outside, the neighbor's dog barked twice and went silent. Somewhere down the street a car started, the ordinary world, continuing as it does, indifferent to the small earthquakes people survive inside their kitchens on Sunday mornings. I got up. I rinsed my mug. I went to my desk and opened my laptop and started my day. Some things you can only wait to see. So you wait. And while you wait, you live your life fully on your own terms, and you do not hold your breath. Daniel talked to his mother. I don't know exactly what he said. He told me the broad shape of it, and I chose to trust the shape rather than demand the details. What I know is that something shifted, not completely, not overnight, but in the way real things shift. Slowly, imperfectly, with occasional setbacks and occasional surprises. Margaret still makes her edged comments sometimes. Old habits are stubborn things. But there is something different in it now. A awareness, however grudging, that there is a line, and that I know where it is, and that I will hold it quietly and without drama and without apology. The family has not gone to Harrington since. We have been to Giovanni's twice. Pleasant, reasonable, the tiramisu still genuinely good. Everyone pays for themselves. No one has suggested otherwise. Nana Rose sent me a card 3 weeks after the dinner, a plain card, cream-colored, handwritten in her careful, slightly trembling script. It said only, "Good for you, dear." It needed doing. I have kept it in my desk drawer. I take it out sometimes, on days when being patient and being strong feels like more than one person should have to manage simultaneously. I read it. I put it back. It is enough. Some battles don't need to be loud to be won. Some lines don't need to be drawn in anger to hold. Some people only understand what you are made of when you show them, quietly, precisely, without a single raised voice, exactly what you will and will not accept. I am Rachel. I am 34 years old. I paid $68 for my salmon and Daniel's chicken, left Elliot a very generous tip, and drove home with my husband's hand in mine, and I have never once regretted a single moment of it. The most powerful thing a woman can do is refuse to be managed. Not loudly, not dramatically, just clearly, completely, finally. And that is the story of the dinner. That changed everything. Not just the dinner itself, but what came after it. The Sunday morning phone call, the kitchen table conversation, Howard's unexpected knock on the door. Claire's quiet admission at a child's birthday party. Nana Rose's 8 words on a cream-colored card. People ask me sometimes, was it worth it? Causing that discomfort, splitting that bill, having those hard conversations, and I always say the same thing. The question isn't whether it was worth it. The question is, what was the alternative? 6 more years of smiling through it? 6 more years of being very independent, in a tone that was never a compliment? 6 more years of being treated like a guest? In my own marriage? No. Some things have a cost, and some costs are worth paying. I paid $68 that night, for my salmon, for Daniel's chicken, and I left Elliot the best tip he probably received all year. What I didn't pay was $4,000 for people who had spent 6 years making me feel like I didn't belong. That bill wasn't mine. It was never mine. And the moment I understood that, really understood it, all the way down, was the moment everything changed. Not just at that dinner table, but in myself. If you are watching this and you recognize something in Rachel's story, if there is someone in your life who mistakes your patience for permission, remember this: kindness is not weakness, silence is not acceptance, and knowing your own worth is not something you owe anyone an apology for. You are allowed to hold your line, quietly, clearly, without drama, without raising your voice even once, just like Rachel did. Thank you for spending this time with me today. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you have a story like this, drop it in the comments below. This community listens. I'll see you in the next one.